India's minority policy is anti-national. I do not use that word lightly but with full responsibility and seriousness. Our country was partitioned on the basis of religion. Muslim League wanted special rights for Muslims, but Congress preferred division of the country rather than giving into blackmailing by Jinnah. 7 decades later, we are slowly going back to the square one. Here are 10 reasons why our minority policy is a big fraud. First, the Constitution does not define who is a minority and who is majority. However, all the schemes run by Minority Affairs cater to the 6 recognized minorities: Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains and Parsis. No one seems to know why this is so. Second, it is not really a minority policy but a Muslim policy. Scholarships worth thousands of crores are given to the 6 minorities. These are not given based on merit but based on their population, which means that Muslims, the biggest minority, get more than 80% of the allocation. Third, the minority policy does not primarily serve the smallest minorities. As scholarship budget allocation shows, smallest minorities like Jains, Sikhs, Parsis or Buddhists get the least share of the pie. Fourth, Hindus are denied all benefits under minority schemes even in the states where they are in minority. The Supreme Court in 2002 in the TMA Pai case had ruled that the minority cannot be defined at the national level because the Constitution also talks about linguistic minorities, and since they can be determined only at the state level, religious minorities should also be defined state-wise. But this recommendation has been thrown in the dustbin. Fifth, India's minority policy flies in the face of all logic and evidence. Its advocates say that minorities are economically and socially backward and need government support for their upliftment. And since education is the best tool to overcome these challenges, special initiatives for their education are required. But let's look at the data. According to the 2011 census, the literacy rate of Hindus is 63.61%, which is much lower than that of the minorities. How can then the Indian state justify giving an educational scholarship to say Jains with a literacy rate of 86.73% while denying the same to Hindus who have literacy rate of only 63.61%. Even Muslim literacy rate is only slightly lower than that of Hindus. Similarly, let's look at the religion-wise national monthly mean household consumption and expenditure. Here, the difference between Hindus and Muslims is almost negligible, while other minority communities are far ahead. Seeing these figures, how can anyone justify giving scholarships to poor children of one community and denying it to those of others? Sixth, the minority policy is justified saying the minorities are small in numbers, hence they feel insecure and need extra protection. But then why don't the smallest minorities such as Sikhs, Parsis, Buddhists and Jains feel insecure, but the global majorities, Muslims and Christians too? Clearly, feeling insecure and being a minority are not related. Seventh, some support the minority policy saying that Muslims are backward because of discrimination against them. But it's simply not true. 51% of Muslims live in the poorer states of UP, Bihar, Assam and Bengal, while these states house only 32% of India's total population. So naturally, on average, the Muslim community comes out as poorer. Their huge family size makes matters worse. Women aren't allowed to study. Most of the children attend madrasas. All this adds to their misery. Eighth, minority policies are championed saying that these communities need state's help like SCs and STs. But as data shows, except Muslims, all other minorities are ahead or at par with upper caste Hindus on both the economic and education parameters. Plus, comparing Muslims with SC/STs is wrong. The constitution makers provided for special concessions to the latter based on their historical position and not on economic criteria. Ninth, look at how the Indian state regulates educational institutions. If Amar, Akbar and Anthony open schools in the same neighborhood, teaching the exact same subjects, having the same syllabus and teaching from the same textbooks, they are going to be treated differently by law. While Hindu education institutions, whether aided or unaided by the state, are forced to reserve quota for the poor and the backward classes, including for minority students, minority educational institutions, both aided and unaided, are exempt from such social responsibility, even for their own community members. 10th, it's the same for the administration of religious institutions. Temples can be taken over by the state and treated as state property, with money being taken from them and used for secular causes. On the other hand, the Indian state is designing schemes to give money for the development of schools and hospitals on Waqf properties, which enjoy unparalleled autonomy. The makers of the constitution were careful not to burden the term minority with a static and unchanging definition, which is why they kept it open to interpretation. Accordingly, the constitution speaks of minority rights in the spirit of conserving the diversity of the country by ensuring that a minority group, say speakers of Sanskrit in today's India, are encouraged to preserve their way of life. However, the polity has failed the spirit of the constitution by hijacking the purpose of these rights to cater to vote bank politics. It has essentially put minorities on a higher pedestal than the Hindu majority in the eyes of law. It's not acceptable. This is Arihant Pavadia for Upward.